Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the latest episode of the Leena AI podcast. Today, I have with me as a guest Mr. Akshar Wunnava, the VP of Innovation and Optimization at Pearce Services. Thank you so much for joining us today, Akshar.
Thanks so much for having me, Adit. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, before we get into the meat of AI and how it helps our industry, can you please talk about your role at Pearce? What are your primary responsibilities and focus areas? And just tell us more about what does Pearce Services really do?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Pearce, we pride ourselves in our ability to design, operate, and maintain our nation's most critical infrastructure, mainly across telecom and renewables. So we service over 80,000 telecom sites and over 12,000 renewables sites spanning wind, solar, energy storage, and EV charging stations. When it comes to me and my role, so I am the core leader over our innovation and optimization team. So we are a team of project managers, business analysts, project coordinators, data scientists, and change managers. And we work across all of our divisions at Pearce to identify, design, pilot, and scale strategic improvement opportunities, both for efficiency improvements as well as developing new tech-enabled services.
That makes sense, Akshar. Just to make sure I simplify it for everyone listening this, right? So if I was to think about this, let's say there is a telecom tower for a cell services, cell coverage, right? And if something goes down, so you have the team that will go out there and fix it. Is that of course, there's an oversimplification, but is that what one part of the team does?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our telecom sites, we would both do preventative maintenance throughout the year, as well as any sort of repairs that come up of the units on the ground, like HVAC and generators.
Then the same for, let's say, EV charging stations for any of these, like EV charging station, you're doing preventive maintenance, and of course, if something goes down, you're gonna go there and okay. So, how should we think about renewable services and your work at a macro level?
Absolutely. So if we zoom out, the core of the work that we do is work management, which I would really break down into three core phases. The first is work initiation and planning. The second is how we do dispatch and field operations. And the third is closing out our jobs and enterprise type services. So when I say work initiation and planning, that's really about securing the contract, scoping out the actual work that needs to be done, creating the work orders, and the planning surrounding it. So how many people do we actually need? How many vehicles do we need? What types of materials, equipment, and tools? Then when we come to dispatch and field operations, that's really about getting the right person matched to the right job with the right tools and equipment. And of course, field operations is enabling that technician to complete that work in a safe and reliable manner. The third phase, closeout and enterprise services, is quality assurance or quality control, delivering the final report to the customers, closing out the work order, and billing and invoicing type functions. And I would say, as we continue to scale, like these are intensive pieces of work. And so as we increase our customer base or our geographies, our costs would have a pressure to increase as well. And AI and process efficiencies are really how we continue to keep those costs down despite revenue growth. And so it is a critical part of our strategy going forward.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for being so detailed in the three types, the three buckets of work that you guys do. So, like you talked about work initiation and planning, right? You're basically getting the contract, and then just planning for the end, like how are you going to deliver that work for your customer, right? So what role does AI play in that specific part, in that specific bucket for, let's say, telecom, solar, wind, and EV infrastructure that you guys service?
Yeah, I would start with the main pain point that we have, or the main challenge of this phase, is determining what work we need to do and when it needs to get done. And so if you imagine a solar field or a solar farm, and we're basically in charge of maintaining uptime for that solar farm. The most important thing for us is being able to monitor the site and the health and production of that solar plant. And so a use case like remote asset monitoring, where we can rely on sensors that we use on the solar field itself, as well as nearby weather stations, would allow us to get the data remotely to determine the status of the assets. And then we can use predictive models based on AI and machine learning to determine what work needs to be done ahead of any sort of critical breaks that happen. And one example of this on wind turbines, for example, is using vibration monitoring for blades, where based on the vibrations, we can actually figure out ahead of time if there might be a major repair or crack or fault that might be occurring. From there, if we actually move to creating the work order and getting the work flowing through the rest of the system, we often have to duplicate the work order in our system and then communicate it back to our customers. And so as we think about generative AI, being able to automate that work order creation step and integrating across both our portal as well as our customers' portal would save a lot of time in the work initiation and planning steps.
Got it. So we are looking at different types of, like, you support a lot of telecom, solar, wind, EV infrastructure, generally a lot of different types of industries. So you're basically saying that, okay, you are tracking different types of signals depending on which particular industry you're servicing, and you're trying to predict the need of preventive maintenance based on the data you're getting. So your models basically look at different types of signals coming in from different data sources, and then you predict, okay, you know what, in this particular wind farm, because the vibrations of each and every wing is very high, or it's increasing and it's not going back down, so probably we need to go in and check it out before a big incident actually happens, right?
Certainly, yep. And obviously it depends customer to customer, and this is a big trend, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is how much customers are willing to share that data with us as well. Because the more data that we share across these boundaries, across the value chain, obviously the more insights and the more action we can take preventatively.
Yeah, got it. I think it will also allow you to schedule the preventive maintenance at a time where you see no business loss or no energy loss. So for example, if you want to do preventive maintenance for solar farms, you can just make sure they do it at night, right? Or wind farms, you can do it at a time on a low or with very less wind. So you can also plan that instead of it breaking down when it was probably production time.
Absolutely, and more that is the type of service that our customers are expecting, is not just transactional do work scope A, but more what I care about as a customer is I want to maximize my revenue from my solar field. And so whenever we have to do the maintenance, do it at a time when the revenue loss would be the least. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned this very interesting thing about customers sharing data. So see, in our field, when we integrate with ERPs, CRMs, ITSM, HRIS software, we face the same question. So how do you handle this, right? I think, do you find customers willing to give you data because they get the convenience and the ROI of overall lesser cost and higher revenue? Or do you find customers willing to do that, or is that an uphill battle for you guys?
I think so. Certainly on the renewable side, it is still a maturing industry, and so as customers are learning what drives efficiency for them and are willing to structure contracts in new ways, we're seeing more and more that there is an expectation of risk sharing. So the contract is no longer, if you do this work or this inspection maintenance, you get paid X amount. It's moving to, I will pay you for maintaining uptime beyond a certain percentage threshold, and whatever work you need to do. So now we're actually sharing the risk, and it's on companies like Pearce to do preventative maintenance effectively, to do repairs effectively, to maintain that uptime. And so it's moving more in that direction where it's going to require a bit more data sharing, but certainly the industry has a bit of variance there still.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it almost takes me back to, I don't know if you followed the MRI, CT scan, all of the big machines. So all of these, Siemens and the big guys who make these machines actually have SLA-based contracts with hospitals, because hospitals are like, hey, MRIs and CT scans make me money. So if it is down, I'm losing thousands of dollars every hour, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense for you and for them to kind of work together and have the same end goal and it's actually better for everyone, especially in the case of renewables, because more produce gives us, subsidizes cost for us as customers, and of course better for the environment too.
Yeah, certainly a win-win.
Everyone's happy. No, that makes a lot of sense. So we covered the first bucket of work initiation and planning, and how are you using AI and Gen AI to think about efficiencies and make it better overall. What about field operations? Like I think this is very, very operationally heavy as an industry that you're in. Someone has to go physically out, whether it's preventive maintenance or it is actual maintenance. Someone has to, not just one person, but multiple people, probably multiple teams have to go out. You have to figure out geographies and widespread areas. So where do you think AI can help you get efficiencies in field operations?
And so when we think about field operations, there's both an aspect of conducting inspections through technicians, and then also doing the actual remediation or repair that's required. So when it comes to inspections, as you can imagine, the pain point right now is it's a manual process. It's very time and labor intensive. If you can imagine a technician having to walk every row of solar panels in a field. And so the ability to have robotic site inspections, so whether it's drones or on the ground robots that can basically traverse every row of the field, take pictures, and then use image processing and machine learning models to figure out, is something wrong with a certain panel? What's the type of fix that's needed? That will cut down the amount of manual, labor intensive and time intensive nature of conducting inspections. So that's certainly the first area I would mention. Then when we move to the actual dispatch of how we match technicians with jobs and the resources that are required, there are certainly very complex optimization models based on AI, and that can learn over time on how we create these schedules. And it's a really complex Tetris game, if you can imagine, trying to increase utilization of all of our technicians and make sure that we're covering all of the jobs in a given geography, or even across the country. And once we create the schedule, we want to be able to provide the technicians with the right documentation and information about the scope that they actually need to do. And that's certainly a place where Gen AI can help, where taking all the work order information, it can distill the scope down for a technician on what work needs to be done. And then when we move to actually being on the site, how can AI help the technician once they're already on the site? So most of the sites that we work in are in very remote places, and technicians oftentimes may need support in terms of, I have a question for my manager, or a certain policy question, or some sort of IT support that's needed. And so instead of making a phone call or waiting for a manager to arrive on site, or you don't have internet, and so it takes a while to be able to contact IT, we can input all of the standard operating procedures and IT manuals in a library or repository, and have a Gen AI enabled chatbot to be able to assist our technicians live without having them wait on the field. And the last step of the process for our technicians on the field is actually filling out the paperwork, if you will, on what work they actually did, how long it took, and did they actually complete the scope. And that's time that the technicians don't take pride in, because they want to be out there actually working with their hands and filling out that and completing the work, not filling out the paperwork. And so using automated field data capture, whether it's wearable cameras or more simple mobile app workflows, being able to quickly cut down the amount of time it takes for a technician to have to input what work they did is another area where Gen AI can come into place and reduce that field data capture time.
Oh, that's fascinating. I think have you already implemented any of these things? Is something already live for you guys? Can you share some examples of efficiency gains in any of these areas? I know you mentioned robots and drones to do automatic instead of going from solar panel to solar panel, they automatically do the test for you instead of a human having to do it. And then they can do it in any condition, and probably you can leave one in a particular solar farm as well, right? Like, no transportation will essentially be needed except charging, right? And then you mentioned easier like routing optimization and efficiencies around just getting the right person on the job as soon as possible. You mentioned IT, HR, issues that people might face, and they don't have access to any of the support services from the enterprise. We see a lot of that. That's exactly one of the core use cases that we like solve for at Leena, and we have a lot of companies with distributed workforces who absolutely love this because it reduces tickets, save time, and it's great experience for the person, right? They don't want to be, if they're logged out, they don't want to be sitting for three hours to fill out that form that you're talking about, right? And then lastly, you mentioned closing out work orders via filling out forms and automating that using computer vision. So is any of this already field tested for you? And if yes, like what are the efficiency gains that you've seen already?
Great question. I mean, 10 years ago, you might have said a lot of these were science experiments or things that were still being piloted. This is very much the reality today. So for example, we have a routing software that we've implemented across our wireless teams and are scaling across to different divisions as well, wireless being our telecom teams. And we're seeing a 10 to 15% gain in the number of jobs that a technician is able to complete in a given day, because we're just routing more efficiently and reducing the drive time for these technicians. Similarly, we're also, we've piloted a streamlined mobile app where it's much easier for a technician to quickly go through and fill out the information after the work is completed. So not yet computer vision, but certainly not paper. And that's cut down the amount of time it takes for that technician by more than 2/3 to fill out what they actually did out in the field. And across all of these, we are exploring ways to use drones as an example to conduct overhead site inspections, as well as preparing our library of standard operating procedures so that we can feed it into a Gen AI type of system. So certainly a lot of progress has already been made, and certainly over the next 12 to 24 months, we're hoping to build almost all of these.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, like 10 to 15% gains, and then 2/3 on the routing stuff, and the 2/3 cut on filling out paper. I think that's like real efficiencies that helps everyone. All the stakeholders involved. So beyond the core operations, how do you see AI adopted across other enterprise functions like IT, HR, finance, or supply chain management? Are there specific areas where AI can provide immediate value in streamlining your operations?
Absolutely. So if we start with an HR lens, what we have is a very large workforce that has a lot of movement, both geographically and because of seasonality. And so it's really important for us to be able to forecast how many people we need with what skills in which locations. And also from a hiring perspective, be able to proactively reach out to folks that are in our database, or maybe a technician applied for a generator job, but there's a different division that they can also apply for, but they didn't know that. And so being able to proactively make those connections, using AI to test for technical skills so that it doesn't have to be an HR recruiter on the other side conducting all of the tests. And certainly in terms of onboarding and training and development, there's areas where AI can and generative AI can come in. And I read this case study about Walmart using a generative AI assistant to train their employees on customer service or how to deal with rogue customers. So certainly a lot of scope in the HR space. Now, when it comes to finance and accounting, we have thousands of jobs across dozens of customers and contract types. And so it becomes a complex process at the end of every month to be able to close out all of our work orders and do our invoicing and billing. And so certainly having Gen AI type agents or agent workflows where we can automate these processes would lead to a lot of gains, especially as we increase the number of customers and complexities of our contracts as we go forward.
Well, I think that's amazing. And for a lot of the HR things that you mentioned, like we work with a lot of our enterprise customers on the HR side of the house, right, and IT side of the house. I think there are huge efficiency gains in onboarding, training, and development. I think like getting the person ready for the job can be cut down by over 50% if you get the right AI tools and the right technology overall and AI tools in place for your new hires. And that's we've seen those gains really getting like actualized for our customers as well. So great to see that you also feel the same. uh, Overall, like we've talked about many things today, like we've talked about how it's impacting multiple parts of your business, including the work initiation and planning, optimizing of your field operations, and close out and overall enterprise value of AI and Gen AI, in all of these three buckets of the business that you have now. How do you balance risk? Like I think one of the biggest topics in minds of leaders and our audience today, our audience consists of CIOs, CFOs, chief operating officers, CEOs, right? Like, what is, according to you, like how do you decide to balance risk, right? Because there are board meetings where people are saying, okay, you know what, now AI can turn rogue, or Gen AI can turn rogue, and we are getting closer to AGI. We will lose control of a lot of different things that we have, data we have, processes we have, and there's generally a lot of just fear around this. So how do you navigate that in your own organization?
Yeah, so let me tackle the safety element of that question first. So I mean, in this industry and for us at Pearce, like safety is absolutely top of mind for our technicians and our workforce. And the piece that complicates it for field services is no two sites are necessarily the same. And so how do we prepare and equip our technicians to be safe every day, regardless of the condition, regardless of the site? And so AI is a way we can actually make preemptive safety assessments based on a plethora of factors. So we know that this is the record that such and such technician has had. We know they're going to this sort of geography. We know the weather is going to be inclement on a particular day. So taking all of those factors into account to provide managers with safety assessments so that they can spend more time trying to mitigate those risks. And there's actually, I read an interesting article about manager podcasts that are Gen AI based, where based on all of these sort of metrics, as a manager is driving to different sites, they can actually just listen to a podcast that tells them, hey, these are the technicians that you probably want to coach today. This is why. This is how they performed over the past week or past month, and this is how we actually suggest you coach them. And that's a way that we can actually actualize safety being top of mind and utilizing the data that we have and providing insights to our managers' fingertips.
That's actually very interesting. You could literally just create a podcast thanks to not just generative text AI model, like large language models. You have like all kinds of models generating voice. So podcast generation should also, that's a very good idea, I think, for listeners of this podcast. I think that is a good takeaway, that you can even use so this is on the job reminder, on the job training almost, right? And you can, instead of being a ping, because we all get emails about all 1,500 different types of things which people generally miss. But if you make it like something you have to listen to while driving or while going, just use that time. I think that's a brilliant idea overall, Akshar. What about like navigating the fear of this in your own organization? Like, have there been instances where there has been fear of implementing something, and how did you navigate that, Akshar?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of change management that's required across many industries, because most industries are on different places within the adoption curve for AI. And certainly within field services, I think we might be slightly earlier on, and there's certainly a change management challenge with explaining to our workforce what AI is, how it's going to help them. And the first sort of concern that we often hear is related to job security. Like, what is this? Are you automating my job? And of course, everyone has sort of figured out the answer to this, that it's about evolution and moving from horse-drawn carriages to cars is the example that we often go with. My personal favorite example is the role of a driver as cars have evolved. So the drivers back in the day had to focus all of their attention on stick shift and changing gears. And then as cars became automatic, you don't have to do that anymore, but now you have all of these bells and whistles, and you have to change the air conditioning and Bluetooth and music and so on. And now, if you're driving a Tesla with full self-driving, you have to do even less, but you have to learn when the car may not be best equipped to continue being automatic and how you have to step in immediately and be ready for that. So you're still a driver in all three horizons, but the facets of driving that are important and that need to be trained are very different. And a driver who is driving manual, you can't necessarily pick him or her up and put them in a full self-driving car and expect them to know how to do all of the things outside of core driving.
Yeah,
there's certainly an evolution in the types of skills. It's not necessarily, you're doing task A today and tomorrow we'll retrain you and do something completely different. It's the same family of tasks is evolving over time.
no, I agree with you. If you were to take the same example forward to Waymo, how would you think about it? Like if I was to think about it, take it forward to Waymo, I'd say that, I think there are people who are sitting behind the Waymo in case the Waymo gets stuck. So I've been a couple of times, right? So it actually got stuck. So mine got stuck, right? So it was on a red light. The red light went green. It didn't move. Like people just went around us and honking and all of that. But there was a person who then finally rescued us and, just fixed it, right? So I think then the nature of that, the driver will then become probably a little more, even lesser involved for every car, but can have immense impact, because now a single person could probably not just drive one car, could drive 5, right? Why not? So I fully agree with you, Akshar, and good to hear your insights on this. I think the comment on losing jobs, I still remember like our first 10 customers. We generally work with very large enterprise, right? Like, so our first 10 customers, every time we went in, we had the same thing. Hey, are you going to take my job? The HR team or the IT team, hey, are you going to take my job? Of course not. Like in all of those customers, even today, we've reduced ticket. We've reduced the low value adding work that they do and enable them to do so much more with their time. Now they can go build roadmaps, solve bigger problems, for their customers, which is internal employees, and add more efficiencies to the organization. So I fully agree with what you're saying. I think the nature of the job will keep evolving, and people will keep doing more and more and more with their time. Perfect. So to kind of wrap all of this up, I'd love to ask you one final question. As a leader, what advice would you give to businesses preparing for widespread AI adoption? Because that's something that's definitely going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years in every large enterprise globally. What cultural and operational shifts should they focus on to maximize the potential of AI while staying true to their principles?
So probably a few things. The first is, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, don't have an AI strategy. I think it's important to have a business strategy, but be hyper aware as to how AI and analytics can accelerate or facilitate your business strategy and accelerate that journey. So that's the first, because otherwise we're often at risk of having a hammer and looking for a nail with AI. The second thing I would say is it's critical to focus on creating a data culture. AI tools are not just something that IT works on or a couple data scientists work on. Down to the very last technician, everyone is a part of the game. It's a team sport. And the technicians also need to understand that they are our first line of defense in terms of the data quality that enters the system, and why that's important and how it leads to real operational changes and decisions that are being made. The third is there will be sort of shifting skill sets across the org, but also new skill sets that will be introduced. So data scientists may not be in your organization today, but if you are serious about embarking on this journey, you may need to hire for different skill sets. And finally, you don't have to build everything yourself or build it all in-house. So this is the build versus buy decision. And any of the use cases that multiple industries have are things that you can probably buy off the shelf or buy from a vendor, versus use cases that are hyper specific to your particular industry or your particular company. You may want to invest building those sorts of use cases in-house.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of CXOs overall on build versus buy. Like, when do you decide to build versus when do you decide to buy, right? And I think my idea on this is, like, if it affects your core operations, like you own a lot of data that is actually going to get used to train the model. I think you should try and build it, because that's going to be a core IP that can be a competitive advantage for you down the line, right? So for example, the routing software you're talking about, right? Like I think that's core data to your business, and it makes a lot of sense for you to kind of course you can use something open source, but like the data and the final model should be owned, and that should be your IP. Similarly, like if I'm a loan disburser, if I'm a company that gives out, or if I'm a bank which is giving out loans, the model which decides what loan to give or not, right, should be essentially be trained by me and fine-tuned by me instead, and owned by me as an IP, because it could be a significant advantage if I can make sure I have lesser defaults using my superior model. I have a better business case, and I can win the market, right? So I think, and then everything else, like for example, like we speak to CEOs, CFOs, CIOs all the time, right? And I tell them the same thing, right? If it's your support functions like IT, HR, finance, like you have no business building, right? Like that's where companies like us should come in, because we've done this for like 500 plus 500 plus customers. So it's our job to go and do it, and it's not like that gives you the efficiencies to be more agile, get faster. But if it is your core business, and it's like if you own the data on that, then you should you should build yourself, because it'll give you competitive advantage in this industry.
I think that's well said, and couldn't agree more. I think AI models are becoming more and more democratized, and everyone is learning how you can build a model. The secret sauce is really the underlying data, and that's something that will always remain at a competitive edge in any industry.
Absolutely. I think this has been amazing, and I'm sure it has been very, very insightful for our audience today. So thank you so much for doing this, Akshar. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everybody who's listening in. Have a great day ahead.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.